Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome back to the Wrestling Inc. Daily. It's me, your managing editor of WrestlingInc.com, and I am back here in the old chat room over on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram for WrestlingInc.com, and of course, I am joined here for the very first time on Thursday with my new Thursday co-host. It is our good friend Paul Pratt, and you may also know Paul, obviously from Effie's Big Gay Brunch, or just also on the general social media feeds as well as Pollo Del Mar. Paul, thank you so much for joining the Wrestling Inc. Daily. I am thrilled to have you on board with the team, but man.
Oh man, I am so excited to be part of this, and I'm so excited that you and Raj invited me to join. So thank you to Wrestling Inc. I look forward to building a connection with all the listeners out there and sharing our collective opinion of AEW and all the other exciting things happening in the world of wrestling.
Yeah. Thursdays we get to dive into like some of the big news coming out of AEW. There was a lot of AEW news last night. We're also going to dive into other big news in the past 24 hours. And since we are live now in Technicolor over on all these great wrestling social media channels when we record the news segment, you guys can also jump into the chat room over on YouTube, over on all of the social media places. If you leave a comment, you jump in and you engage us. We will maybe throw your comment up over on the screen. We may even bring it up here on the show, so be sure to jump into the comments section. We got a big show here today. Of course, like Paul said, we're going to talk all the news of the past 24 hours. We're going to talk AEW. If you're listening in audio form to the podcast, you are going to hear my interview with our good friend Joe Dombrowski, who is the producer for the Brian Pillman Memorial Show 20th Anniversary Anthology, which is out now. So stick around if you're an audio show fan right now to hear Joe. And then also, if you are watching us in video form, after we wrap the news up of the day, you can also catch my interview with Joe over on the YouTube channel for Wrestling Inc. Also, Paul, real quick, whatever that rustling is, whatever that wind sound is that I'm hearing is getting louder. I don't know if there's any way to change your microphone settings or what it may be, but you are creating a large rustling. I just muted you. Yeah. Is there anything you could do to possibly bring down your here?
I don't even know what's creating that rustling, Nick.
Yeah, so I don't either, Paul. But it's getting louder. So anyway, we'll kind of roll with it here, I guess, for today. Might want to double check to see if that blue microphone can pop up there on your microphone settings here while we're troubleshooting at the top of the show.
For sure.
Yeah. So with that out of the way, we're going to hear from Joe Dombrowski here later on. We're going to talk the news of the day. And then after we talk the news of the day and we hear from Joe and give you a chance to go check out my interview with Joe over on the YouTube channel, we will also dive into the mailbag and we are going to look at what you thought was match of the night from last night's AEW Dynamite. And that'll bring us right here into news you can use. News that will leave a bruise. We are going to start with, of course, AEW Dynamite. The big news coming out of the show, Miro defeated Darby Allin in the main event to capture the AEW TNT Championship. A big win there for Miro. This match is very gifable. That gif of Darby just kind of throwing himself underneath that second and bottom rope there with that suicide dive onto Miro. I've seen it about 1 million times on my feed. What did you think of the big win here, and how did you think that Miro's win came across to the fans at home, Paul?
Well, first of all, I thought that this was the right move for AEW. From my perspective, because I'm a huge Miro fan, I expected them to do a lot more with him from his entry into the company than they did, in my opinion. And I think that this is going to really open up a lot of stories for Miro to be told going forward. I also think that if you're a fan of Darby, you might have been really disappointed by this because they hyped up the fact that this was Darby's 10th defense of his championship. And in my opinion, that championship run didn't look terribly impressive. I mean, he spent the last several weeks defending against members of the Dark Order, and those were people who were nowhere near contention for that belt, in all honesty. So there was a lot more I think that they could have done, but I think that one of the things that we're seeing displayed here, and I want new listeners to recognize that I'm able to understand completely that I'm not necessarily the entire breadth of the AEW viewing audience. Darby doesn't hit the mark for me. He doesn't. Really? He does not hit the mark for me. And I think that my nephew, who's 20 years old and who I introduced by going to AEW Live for his very first live pro wrestling event, loves Darby. He loved Orange Cassidy. Neither one of those characters do it for me. I think I'm in a different viewing age. And I know I'm going to get heat right away. I'm not a big fan of any of them. I also want to let people know that concurrently, I wasn't a fan of when Sting became Dark Sting, right? I wasn't a fan of that either. And so, I see Z1's comment. Who is this guy? I just don't like him. I am not the 18-year-old target audience that they're looking to build. And that doesn't negate the fact that I think that they have a place on AEW television. I think that they could have done a lot more to make Darby look strong. In the long run, I thought he looked strong in his loss, but I don't think that he had a run that's going to, kind of build up to what they would have looked for in him. I think that we're going to have to see that in the next run for him if he gets one.
Hey, some valid points there. I mean, right, like those characters that you mentioned there, they play right to that kind of younger demo. So
absolutely,
if you're not in, you're not in. I think those guys are great. I think there's a real nice package that's been put together for both of them, and especially with the more layered storytelling we've gotten with Darby and Sting. You don't really see a whole lot of that with AEW performers. But in general, like this match, I thought it played out really well with Miro.
It did.
I thought Miro being on the offensive and just going after Darby and really, dominating this guy for the entire bout. Right at the end there, when Darby like fired up out of nowhere, hit the Paris, I think it was not stunners. That was the Orange Cassidy match with Pac, but he had a couple quick moves there, and it looked like maybe he was going to turn the tide. After being beat down for so long, I was just surprised to see he had that much fire and they gave him that much offense. But for Miro to ultimately kind of swipe him out of the air, plant him down there, and get the win, I just thought it came across really well. I thought Miro looked like a really dominant competitor here. I think he's going to be a really good TNT champion. And yeah, maybe this will give him a chance to do something with Darby now that it'll grab your attention a little bit differently.
Well, one of the things I think that there's a very black and white mindset with pro wrestling fans. Like if you're not like really high on somebody, then all of a sudden you're like a hater. I don't hate either one of these individuals. What I really think is that we need to look at them in the broader perspective of where their careers are. AEW is only a couple years old. These are two very young talents. I'm lumping him in with Orange Cassidy because I feel the same way about both of them. I think that both of them are in a tremendous upswing in their career. We have to look at them as somebody who has years of time ahead of them. And I would go back to, for example, I think the obvious comparison for Darby would be Sting. Now, mind you, Sting started out as something besides that dark character. That was his turning point after he had done everything that they could do with him in NWA, and they were kind of at a stopping point with where to develop him. But Sting's development came in a series of near misses when he was going against Ric Flair. That was how his build was. And he went up against Ric Flair at the height of Ric Flair's popularity and domination of NWA, WCW. And by getting very close, it built his credibility so that when he finally went over, people were really excited about that. I think that Darby and Orange are both in that part of their career where on their trajectory is up. I don't think that this win for Darby is the stopping point for him. I think that this is just really the beginning. And I think that as they begin to put him in against other people and he continues to prove himself, I would also compare this to what they did with Jeff Hardy when Jeff Hardy was making a name for himself as a singles wrestler. Remember, it was that near, gaining the respect of The Undertaker by giving his all and not quitting and never saying die. Yeah. So it took a while for them to get him over that hump. I think that for fans like myself, Darby may be at that point where they're just trying to get him to the hump to go over.
Okay, fair enough. Well, also on the show here last night, Frankie Kazarian and Christopher Dan. Or no, wait, we'll get to that here in a second. I wanted to get to the other thing first. So, PWInsider.com reporting that the original finish for last night's #1 contender match between Pac and Orange Cassidy actually had to be changed after Cassidy was legit knocked out during the bout. They were initially set to wrestle for 20 minutes to a draw, but a stiff kick to the head may have rocked Cassidy. It also was reported that it might have been the sunset powerbomb to the floor. That could be the reason he got knocked out. Cassidy apparently wanted to get up, finish the match, but an audible was called 13 minutes in to not only stop the match, but to do a quick angle to end the match, a double countout after Omega hit Pac with the belt to keep Cassidy in the pay-per-view title match. So, of course, then Shivani came out and, per Tony Khan's orders, announced that Omega would defend the title against both Pac and Cassidy at Double or Nothing. A whole lot of this is all just very different, right? AEW doesn't do a whole lot of like schmoz endings. This felt weird to me from the get. Like this all makes much more sense now.
It does. It makes much more sense than what I saw on television.
Much more sense because this is the kind of stuff they were trying to stay away from when they launched the company, right?
Yeah, that I think that it makes a lot more sense to me as well, that because that it seemed rushed on television. Part of me didn't, that seems par for the course in some instances. They try to move things really fast on that program, but at the same time, it just did not quite make sense to me. To know that they were planning to go to a 20-minute draw and then move both people forward makes a lot more sense than what happened.
Yes.
So,
and that's much in the kind of sports lane that AEW likes to do. They don't like to do the kind of like wacky pro wrestling, F job finishes there. So this all makes a ton of sense to me, and also good on AEW for if this report is true, not allowing Orange to continue on with the match like a lot of wrestlers, want to do. I think back to the Matt Hardy incident, where they've let performers continue on and they've pursued.
Where Matt Hardy, I mean, I thought it was going back to the Matt Hardy incident, it was a lot worse. The way it looked at the ending is if they'd just called it like right then on the spot, like, oops, this went really messed up, Yeah.
So good on AEW there for that one. Until this happened, I actually thought this was a really fun match. Like, I'm always really surprised at how good of and I know this sounds like dismissive, but I'm always really surprised at like how good of a wrestler Orange Cassidy is. Maybe just because he doesn't really like look like your typical wrestler or whatever, but like the guy can go. He definitely held his own with Pac in there, I thought.
Absolutely. And again, this is a situation where I think that he is a talented wrestler, and I think that there's a large upside for AEW with him. It's obvious that he was just voted Pro Wrestling Illustrated's most popular wrestler of the year. So he is clearly connecting with a lot of people. Again, I'm coming on here my very first time out. Nobody knows me. And I'm like making the ultimate heel statements to so many people. He just doesn't do it for me. And, he does not do it for me. It does not at the same time, because I'm saying very clearly it's not for me. But that doesn't mean there's not tens of thousands of people that he does do it for. And he's a sheer example of what AEW needs to do to distinguish and differentiate itself. And he's clearly one of the faces that they've chosen to really develop as their own homegrown talent that's spiced in with people who are better known perhaps from other places at this point.
Hey, you know what? People out there agree with you there, Paul, because like you got a heart, you got several thumbs up. Like, I don't know that we've ever got a heart all week. I think you got the first heart of the week. I think you could do that on Facebook. So if you like this, more hearts, more thumbs up. So you're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to say one of the most mind-blowing things that happened to me during the last 6 months, Nick, and it relates really directly to some of the things that we're talking about right now. I got trapped, for the viewers, I got trapped sort of in Florida with my family. I live in California, and the huge upside of that was that I got to go to AEW live events every 2 weeks, right? And part of that was introducing my nephew, who was 19 at the time, now 20, to the world of professional wrestling. We've always watched it together on television, but I took him to his first live event, and he immediately connected with all of these younger talents that AEW is pushing. So I think it speaks very well to people like Orange Cassidy or Darby Allin or Jurassic Express, really connecting with these young audiences, which will become the lifeblood of AEW as the company moves forward. Clearly, none of these people necessarily are ready to take the mantle as the face of this company just yet, but in 5 years, they very well and very likely will be. So I think that somebody like an Orange Cassidy, who is wildly talented as a performer, I mean, if you can do all the things that he can do with his hands in his pockets, once he moves past that, and I think that eventually fans may be disheartened because I think he will move past that. He has to evolve. Then perhaps it'll be something that may be more appealing to me. I don't know. I could definitely see how he would appeal to some people, though.
Maybe he does the Sister Mary Kathleen Gallagher thing. He starts to put his hands underneath his armpits, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's a superstar then.
That's how he evolves. He becomes a superstar. Yeah, a lot of good points, made there. But we'll see what happens here at Double or Nothing. I mean, with as hot as Orange Cassidy is right now, I mean, Kenny Omega has kind of been this like chicken shit heel up top for some time now. I don't know if that's run its course or not, but you're going to have fans back for the first time. You're going to be doing the sold out show. You're going to want to deliver something big, right? To really hammer home that the business is up and running again. Does putting the title, I don't see them putting it on Pac. I feel like Pac is being put in there to kind of help with the aesthetic of the match, like to the story and the athleticism of the bout.
Pac's being put in there to take the fall.
You think so? It feels
absolutely, absolutely. Because I have a very hard time, when they were building towards this Orange Cassidy Omega angle, even last week, it became clear to me that that was the match that they were really going to promote at Double or Nothing. Orange Cassidy getting to go against Kenny Omega for the title. I personally don't think that this is the time for Orange Cassidy to go over. I think it's really too soon. I think that it'd be better to build towards an ultimate situation where maybe Pac takes the fall and Omega retains, but then Orange Cassidy gets to say he never beat him one-on-one, right, in that type of setting. But my gut says that they are going to put that belt on Orange Cassidy in front of a fully loaded Daily's Place, and the place is going to explode. And ideally, AEW gives themselves the finale to a big show that they've been trying to get for weeks and weeks now, and sort of like dropping the ball.
They have had a hard time closing, right?
Absolutely.
Like, good shows, but it's like the period at the end of the sentence is more like a comma sometimes. It's just not right.
It's an ellipses. Because it just leaves you thinking like, well, what did they really mean?
Yes, good point.
It's not a period. It's not an exclamation point. They want an exclamation point. It's an ellipses where it's just sort of trails off and you're like, okay, and what?
Let us know what you all think is going to happen here with Pac and Orange Cassidy and Kenny Omega at Double or Nothing. Jump into the comment section. We'll double back here. We'll read some of your guys' predictions for Double or Nothing in a bit. But also, man, the news did not stop coming out of Dynamite last night. Yeah, Frankie Kazarian and Christopher Daniels no longer a tag team after losing to the AEW World Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks. It should be noted that Daniels got busted open when he was super kicked head first into that corner post. And I watched that spot back like a couple times, Paul, and I wanted to believe that Chris like threw himself into it, which I think was part of it, but it looked like that kick snagged him a little bit too. I don't know if he meant to go that hard into that ring post there. That was pretty gnarly, dude.
I think that they definitely wanted to set up that. I think that ultimately that, the blood really amped things up for that match. Daniels was dripping it. I mean, he was busted open as bad as anybody from Blood and Guts last week. And one of the best moments of that match was actually Daniels' blood getting on the sneakers, right? The sneakers that they're talking about being thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And that being like the sneakers being more important than their friendship, right? Like, you messed up my expensive shoes. That to me I felt like that was the match of the night. The in-ring action, all of it, all the way around, to me was match of the night. They're such talented teams. But I don't want to jump ahead of anything that you might have planned to say, but I also will say that it was the biggest disappointment for me of the night. And the reason being that AEW has this thing that I've heard many other podcast hosts, specifically Bully Ray, talk about. They never take a moment to let things breathe. They never let you take in the moment. And for me as a viewer, they've been building to this moment for 6 months because they've been hyping since December that if SCU loses one more match, they're done.
Yeah.
And this is a historic tag team that has held championships around the world. Ring of Honor tag team champions, Impact tag team champions. Like these people are as a team, they're legendary. And this is allegedly their last match as a team. And you're going to cut away during their moment when they're supposed to be having this emotional, we're breaking up moment that the audience is supposed to be participating in. They cut away during it. Most of that happens during a commercial break. And when they come back, they go right to this backstage segment with Moxley and Kingston destroy a dressing room. So that planting the seed for a future match trumped the emotional impact that this should have had. This should have been one of those moments where fans got to soak in that moment and give them their accolades as a team.
I wonder, there's a lot of, I don't think you're wrong. I do think they could have let that breathe more and made that feel more important. I do wonder, as I remove myself and I look at it from a business perspective with AEW, because right now, Christopher Daniels is I think he is the head of AEW talent relations. I think he has the Jim Ross position backstage in AEW right now. I wonder if with them getting back on the road and there's more production and there's more responsibilities, if this was just the time where they were like, look, if you helped us get through this pandemic, if you're looking to do more backstage and this is going to be too much for you to balance that and in ring, was this the time for him? This was just the time they had to do it, right? Chris went on Twitter after the show And he's like, that might be it, y'all.
I saw.
That could have been I mean, he's 51 years old or whatever, you know?
And I'm not talking about the like not giving him just sort of shuffling him to the side. What I'm talking about is they built up to that specific moment of the breakup. Mm-hmm. They built up to it, and we knew it was a strong possibility and even a probability going into this show. But when that moment actually occurred, as opposed to like giving it a moment to breathe and settle in, like, wow, did we just see SCU's last match together? They immediately cut away. I mean, there should have been at least a moment of them in the ring. Like they did it after the fact. They came back and they're like, oh, here they are, hug. And it was like literally 30 seconds, which to me felt anticlimactic and a little disrespectful to a team that has done so much. At least give them that moment in the ring where we see them covered in blood and they're interacting and the audience is going to be cheering and chanting and whatever they're going to be doing. Give it a moment, just give it a moment. I would have loved to have seen something done differently there.
Well, you brought up how after this match, you see Moxley, you see Eddie Kingston. They are trashing the Elite's dressing room, and then the Young Bucks finally push to challenge these two to a tag match. I guess it's going to go down at Double or Nothing for the titles. I'll also throw in there while we're talking Jon Moxley. He retained his IWGP US Championship in the opening match against Yuji Nagata. He came out, and he went away to Wild Thing by the top. Here's the thing. So there was like a couple months ago, remember, where the NBA feed got blended with the AEW feed, and it was really weird. It was like an awful kind of problem. I thought that had happened again. I was like, it sounded like a baseball game or something, I thought, when Wild Thing played. It didn't register to me that was his theme song when he came out. Anyway.
I actually made a note of it because it's things like that let you know. Tony Khan gets a lot of heat from people, I think, because they're like, oh, he's not I guess because he's not a McMahon, right? Like if you're a billionaire and you own a wrestling company, you have to be a McMahon to do it. But people say that he doesn't know what he's doing, or they criticize all these things. And I think that things like that are a nod to the fact of how strong his depth of knowledge of wrestling is, because that's something that I think that most American viewers wouldn't know that was a thing, right? From Japan.
The fact that Onita used to come out to the.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. Just to clarify for everybody.
Right, exactly. So I think that it's a nod to people who are more well versed than just say whatever is happening in America at the time.
Yeah. I thought it was. I don't know if they're going to do it every week. The Wild Thing, it just doesn't grab me as a theme song. Like, where is my mind? I'm getting used to it. Look, I'm a big Pixies fan. I love that song, but does it get me amped? Does it make me want to see wrestling? I'm not sure.
Well. I think that we have to look at it under the context that the way they presented this match. They very specifically stated this is going to be fought under, the Japanese rules, which is a 20 count outside. This is a Japanese competitor competing for a Japanese title, basically. And so they presented basically a 20-minute package of what we would expect from IWGP.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this means that the forbidden door between AEW and New Japan continues to stay open. I thought it was really nice. I love the show of respect between him and Nagata at the end. I still think that this all is going to culminate with current Bullet Club showing up and laying waste to former Bullet Club that wannabe Bullet Club, the Elite that's running around right now. Mm-hmm. I just keep going back to it. I think when you're going to have to sell out, arenas, and you need a big goal to jumpstart the business and stuff, I think that I have a good feeling we're going to get to see this New Japan invasion angle here with AEW in the not too distant future.
Well, can I tell you something I thought was really amusing, though? Sure. They kept repeatedly reiterating the fact that, Moxley wants anybody in the world to challenge for this title. He's even going so far as to invite wrestlers from Japan to come to the U.S. and compete for it. And the only thing I could keep thinking about is like, this is a Japanese promotions title. Of course he's going to invite people from Japan to compete for it. I mean, it's a Japanese title that he's taken to yes, it's usually fought in the US, but it's a Japanese promotion. The other thing that I will say that came to mind during this match, they mentioned Dave Finlay, one half of FinJuice, the current Impact World Tag Team Champions, right? They've got this interpromotional work going on with Impact. They mentioned Dave Finlay in context with this match. They mentioned Finlay's dad, Fit Finlay, but they did not mention Impact at all. And I'm like, this guy's one half of the Impact Tag Team Champions. If you're doing some kind of cross promotion, like, wouldn't that fit in? I mean, I don't know. It came to mind as soon as they said it.
I don't know what is going on with Impact in AEW, other than, like, you know, there's a couple theories, right? Like, I read that, you know, Tony Khan is trying to build up enough of a library to be able to launch some kind of OTT platform. That's why they're or sell to some kind of or Amazon with all the pounds of content that they have, pounds of matches that they have,
right?
Up with the dark stuff. I wonder if, like, the Impact stuff is an extension of that, just a way for them to continue to create content, unique content. But I also kind of wonder, like, I don't know, like, this all from what I was told was just this is like a Kenny Omega passion project. He wants to do this. He was a good soldier the first year or so, didn't put himself to the moon. Now it's his time. This is what he wants to do with this title run. And it's kind of morphed into something else. Like,
he wants to be the sweeper, right? He wants to go and clean up all the titles. He's got 3 major titles from 3 companies around the world. And, you know, he's getting to live that dream. And it definitely looks good for AEW. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the benefit for Impact is. Because,
but some people say, like, look, well, they're doing their best pay-per-view buys, like viewership is up and things like that. But, like, if AEW pulls out, I don't really know what that leaves Impact looking like. You know, I mean, you're going to suck a lot of the oxygen out of the room when that relationship dries up for them.
Especially since, to me, it's hard to imagine. You know, I'm trying to figure out different ways that could go. And like, I don't want to take my theories and derail this. But, you know, one of the things that did come to mind, for example, you know, we're supposed to never see another Dustin Rhodes world title match for AEW. But what if he fights Kenny Omega for the Cody Rhodes. Sorry about that. So Cody's not supposed to fight for the world title, but what if he takes the Impact title? Then he could go there and do whatever and return it to the company. I don't see anybody on the Impact roster taking the belt from him.
No.
Except maybe Moose, but I don't think that's going to happen either.
Well, another very gifable segment from last night. Last week's Dynamite saw the Pinnacle defeat the Inner Circle in that brutal blood and guts match. The winners decided to have a coronation this week in celebration of their big victory. By the end of the segment, they found themselves drenched in a little bit of the bubbly courtesy of the Inner Circle. Chris Jericho and his guys wanted another shot at the Pinnacle, and an infuriated MJF agreed. This time, it's going to be a stadium stampede match at Double or Nothing, and if Inner Circle loses, they are done as a group forever. Jericho didn't give an answer, so it's not official, but it's likely that match is going to take place next month or later this month. But also interesting, absent from this segment was Santana of Proud and Powerful. And in a promo cut earlier in the show, Ortiz said that Santana was in jail because MJF had him arrested for using a fork in the blood and guts match last week. Very creative. The Observer saying that the reason for Santana's absence on Dynamite is because he's sick, and AEW is simply taking a precaution due to the pandemic. So a couple things to unpack here. But first of all, Paul, you've been going to AEW shows during the pandemic. Talk to me about just, like, loosely, did you feel safe? Like, what's that experience like for you at their shows?
I can't speak to what it's going to be like when they return to full capacity, but I will tell you that attending AEW shows live is a joy, really, as it stands now.
Sure.
Parking's easy. Admission is easy. You go through, they send you through a thing where you electronically check your temperature just by putting your face in front of a thing. You will then go in. There's sanitizer everywhere. Like, everywhere you turn, there's sanitizer. And then they have you seated socially distanced from each other. There's rows that are empty in between, and then seats in between anybody who's purchasing a ticket. So it was, I mean, I think that the precautions they're taking are outstanding.
Yeah.
And so if they continue that on a roster side, I think I would only imagine that even if he has a sniffle, they're going to be like, just stay home. We don't want to risk it.
Yeah, man. It's just a reminder that, like, you know, as good as things are right now, and things are getting better. I mean, it's difficult to say things are not getting better. Things are definitely getting better, but there's still, like, a threat out there.
Well, you wouldn't know that in Florida. I mean, they just opened everything up. But actually, coming from California to Florida, I found myself surprisingly relieved, because in California, everything is, like, pretty strict. Florida, not as much. And it just felt like, you know, I'm fully vaccinated, so I'm just ready to like run out, you know?
Yeah.
And by the way, if you're out there and you're resisting, like this is the only way we're going to get back to where we want to be. Just get vaccinated, y'all. You know, it's nice that I don't even with that new microchip I've got, I don't even have to like send people like my, you know, my location. I don't have to share a location on iPhone. They just know. They can just log in somewhere.
Yeah, totally. Me and the dog, we're both chipped now.
Absolutely.
Just like
if you get lost, you can be returned.
Well, and also, of course, like this was the so this segment here with the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle, this was a throwback to the obvious, like the milk beer bath kind of stuff that they've done with Kurt Angle and Steve Austin. Only this time it was a champagne cannon allegedly here, though I don't know that they used champagne, just on a hunch there. I thought that Sammy Guevara looked really cool here, and it explained to me why MJF was wearing such an ill-fitted suit. I don't know if you noticed this, but that pink suit that was not tailored at all, and it was bugging the shit out of me. And then when they got sprayed down, Liz was like, well, that's why you don't wear a nice suit. Get sprayed down shit.
Absolutely. You know, I didn't really notice. I loved the suit. I wasn't watching on a huge screen, so I didn't see that it was ill-fitted, but I actually thought I was like, yeah, he looks really cool. Then again, any guy who wears full suit of pink to me is victorious, but I could not help. I thought it was a really fun segment, but when you are really looking to distinguish yourself from a competing brand and you're doing an obvious throwback to something that immediately brings that to mind, it's just difficult. It's a hard sell for me, because when you're doing something that is clearly an homage to, or if it's not an homage, it's just like a carbon copy of, you know, it's either intentional or unintentional, but either way, it brings to mind one thing. And so it's hard to imagine this necessarily landing as a place where people identify it on its own right.
Sure. No, you're always going to compare it to the other thing. But I will say, sitting on my couch, I was like, oh my God, he's going to shoot that thing at him. And I was like excited to see it happen.
Yeah.
He kind of overshot it at first, but once he got the aim right, I felt like it was convincing that he was keeping those men at bay with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a fun segment. And I think that, you know, I think that people are going to watch this and be like, didn't like the segment with the champagne, doesn't like Orange Cassidy, doesn't like Darby. They're going to think I'm some kind of, you know, AEW hater, which is the utmost of untruths, because obviously I bought a season pass, right, to go see it. I just love the things that they do that don't really hearken me back to something else. And at this time in the world of professional wrestling, that's a little difficult because a lot of things have been done. So you have to find really unique and creative ways to do it, which is one of the reasons, for example, I love the fact that they're revisiting Stampede, the Stadium Stampede, because I think that was one of the most creative, unique things that they've done in their full 2-year history.
Yeah.
So much fun.
All right. Well, hey, guys, we got 2 more AEW Dynamite notes. I see a lot of comments coming in right now. If you want to jump in, leave comments about AEW. When we finish up the AEW Dynamite block, we'll go through, we'll read a couple comments here. So get in your thoughts on anything that we've talked about here on Dynamite. The next thing I wanted to bring up coming out of the show, I was a little betwixt on this, as I am many things that Cody does promo-wise anymore. There's so much subtlety, or not so subtlety, I guess. Cody came out. He cut this like weirdly political promo. I don't know how else to describe it. Right? Yep. He challenged Anthony Ogogo to a match at Double or Nothing. He announced that he's going to do the match as the American Dream, Cody Rhodes, heel by nature, noting that Cody's going to be wrestling under that moniker, even though he legally doesn't own that trademark. He abandoned the trademark for the American Dream on March 31st since he couldn't provide sufficient documentation for outstanding issues the USPTO had with this application. So I don't know what any of that means. But he came out. He talked about how his wife is going to give birth in a city where 40 years ago there was racism. I guess there's not racism in Atlanta anymore. He said he's never not been proud to be an American, which, look, patriotism is great. This is a very confusing time for America. I don't know that statement lands with everyone. Paul, what did you make of Cody's mayoral promo on Anthony Ogogo? What did you think of this one?
Coming from a man who hits a home run almost every single time he picks up a microphone, and I'm talking about all the way back through his WWE career. Cody Rhodes cuts one of the best promos of anybody that I've seen in the industry and will continue to do so. This was a hard miss for me because I did not understand a variety of things. Like, it just sort of came out of left field. Number one, it felt weirdly and oddly political in a way that to me didn't seem, it felt disingenuous because it's sort of like, yes, it glossed over the present issues that we're having, to sort of like build this bigger, it harkened back to that, like, we're real Americans and this is what we stand for. But our country is really divided right now. And I think that to sort of like, try to trumpet how we all come together, we're not doing that right now. That's not realistic representation of what's happening in our country. But more than that, the thing that I kept thinking about is he spent like a good 10 minutes doing this promo about a guy who has barely been seen on television. You're building up this promo and this pay-per-view type of match against Anthony Ogogo, who it'd be one thing if this had happened and it was Miro who had covered him in a Bulgarian, flag, right? Because this is somebody that we know and that there may be some emotional investment. This is Anthony Ogogo. If you don't follow the commentary he did on AEW Dark for a while, or know him from another sport, or haven't seen those two matches that he had as part of the Monster Factory or whatever they're called, the Nightmare Factory, you don't know this guy.
Yeah. I think you're kind of circling in on kind of how I felt about it.
It felt really self-indulgent.
Yes, self-indulgent. It didn't feel like about Anthony Ogogo at all.
No.
Anthony Ogogo was just the premise for Cody to get to take a microphone and cut what I thought was an obvious political promo. I don't know if it was because he thought it was something. I doubt it was because he thought it was something that was going to connect with his whole audience. I think it has more to do with Cody's like long-term political ambitions, right? I mean, this guy has not been shy about talking about how he has interest in politics. And when I see him go out and cut this kind of promo, this seems more something like that he would want to go back to and pull his B-roll when he's putting together his announcement that he's running for mayor of Atlanta. It doesn't play necessarily, I think, in this moment, but I think in his head it plays better down the road, right? For me, that's how it read to me.
I saw a lot of people referencing that recent internet article about how Cody Rhodes needs to F off. I made a note, like, you have your run sheet. I made notes last night when I was watching too, just to make sure that there are certain points. And, in my notes about this, I talked about how, like, he sort of puts over the cons as these like great immigrants who made good, which of course is very true. And I think that that's, a very valid fact, but, and then he puts over his baby. He's talking about the baby a lot and got so choked up about that. And I just felt like this was just another obvious incident where you just can't tell the EVP, the executive vice president, no, like, I want 15 minutes in the middle of the show to put over this random match I'm having at the upcoming pay-per-view event with a nobody, and you're going to give it to me because no matter what.
Yeah, it felt very much like a moment to fully just inflate Cody, right? On pretty much every kind of, ego, super ego level, right? The subliminal, the subliminal. I agree with you. Just felt a little out of place on this show.
And I think Cody really deserves the opportunity to put himself over. I think he's a world-class talent. And if I would have never been the person who, if he had actually come in and eventually made himself the world champion in AEW, I'd have never said a word, because I think that he can put on those matches. And when he was TNT champion, he did great, putting over lots of younger talent. He brought in all these people. He did fantastic. This just does not feel like it's supported by what they're promoting.
And lastly, here to put a kind of pin on this, because we do have other stuff to get to, like, doesn't it kind of feel like he cut the promo expecting fans to start nipping at each other? Right? Like, even like I see people agreeing and disagreeing with, kind of what we're saying here in the comment section. That's fine. But when you cut a promo like that, you know it's going to get people talking. You know it's going to get people saying, well, I disagree. I agree. I disagree. And you're kind of fueling that division in a way, right? When you're making those kind of strong statements and you're telling your fans to either agree or disagree with you, it's not in a subtle way, and it's not necessarily in a wholly productive way, I feel, either. I don't know if that resonates with you in any way, but
I just felt this, the fact that it felt like a political speech more than a wrestling promo. Mm-hmm. And he just like, it just felt really off place. And in my notes, I said, this promo did not resonate with me whatsoever. And I think it's because I would expect somebody in his position, especially since he's hyping this, the fact that he is in an interracial marriage, they will be having a biracial child. And I would expect him to be a little more firm in the fact that there are things that are happening in the world right now that may not, other than the fact that child's going to never have to worry about anything financially, never, ever, there are things that are going to socially impact that child. And one would think you would take a stance against some of those if you're experiencing those.
Yes.
I mean, the heart of the Stop Asian Hate movement literally started from an incident in Atlanta, just to remind you, Cody.
Yeah. All right. Well, lastly here, coming out of Dynamite, a little lighter topic. Hangman Page, he cut a promo. He on last night's show, he talked about his loss to Brian Cage, noting it took 3 men to actually beat him, with all of Team FTW kind of helping him out. So Page thought a guy like Cage wouldn't be truly happy with a win like that. He wants a rematch at the pay-per-view. That match was later made official. So Hangman Page, Brian Cage, another match to kind of just flush out this card right now. I guess there's been some build here with Cage getting that surprise win last week. I would imagine that Page is going to get a victory here and continue on with, momentum. He's in that, young Ford, Jungle Boy, Darby, Orange, Adam Page category of, they may be down for a moment, but I don't think they're going to be down too long.
Yeah, I think that this is actually a great match that I would be very much looking forward to. I had to disagree on social media when Brian Cage defeated Hangman that they call this an upset. I don't think Brian Cage defeating anybody is an upset. Brian Cage is 100% a wildly talented individual, extremely capable. Nobody physically can match up to the way he appears. I could see how they might think it was an upset in the world of AEW, where he hasn't been allowed to shine like he necessarily would other places. I think this is a fantastic long-term program that they could really build around that would amplify both of their presence on the show. And I will tell you, my favorite part of this whole promo was John Silver. No, for whatever reason, John Silver, seeing him live, anytime I see him on TV, his fanboy situation with Adam Page is the cutest thing ever. It's so adorable. I think that any person who doesn't wish that they had someone in their life that looks at them the way that John Silver looks at Adam Page is crazy. And he's so talented. He's also very, very talented. I think that he could become one of their breakout stars in the future too, just because he's so connectable, so relatable.
All right, well, let me read a couple comments here from people that had some thoughts about Dynamite. We'll start with Z1. Darby Body needs a break from wrestling. He takes too many bumps. He is crazy. That is true. Danny Cochran, I like Darby up until they paired him with Sting. Those segments just lead absolutely nowhere. It is kind of a crutch, just kind of pairing him with Sting. I agree.
I don't know if it's a crutch. I think it can do really well for Darby. What I think is problematic is the fact that I was at those live events, and they could have, every time that Darby and Sting came to the ring, it could have just been a rebroadcast of the previous week. There was no progression in where those are going at all. None.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have at Mecca Meach. Those sneakers, by the way, were Nike Air Jordan 1s. That's what.
Yes, I know. My nephew asked for a pair, and I was like, I thought he was crazy.
Anthony Y, when the Wild Thing music hit and Moxley came out, thought it was interesting. Sure. Reminded him of Major League. We've had several.
I don't think that's the reference they were making, but I love the fact that it connected with you on a level.
Sure. Also, I say Anthony Y, he did note that Rocky Romero was in the seats. I read a stat. Rocky Romero has appeared on like 18 different pro wrestling programs this year. I think the only company Rocky has not appeared for this year is WWE, which is wild.
They're lost. Rocky's so talented.
Also, we had several responses here from Pratik Banj that had nothing to do with Dynamite, but his basic refrain has been, "Hey Nick, can you please tell WWE, please bring back unique custom pay-per-view stage for every pay-per-view shows?" He seems to be upset about that. I'll be honest, Pratik, I don't have that sway. I apologize, but I have acknowledged your question.
I mean, in all fairness, they're in the same exact location every time, so it's pretty hard to build a custom stage for, maybe we'll see that soon. Maybe. Hopefully, fingers crossed, SummerSlam.
Wait, what, huh? They said, bro, why do y'all want to make it such a big deal? It was art, SMH, sensitive era for no reason. And he was talking about the Cody promo, which some people, again, people jumped in on this. Like, we had dihydrotestosterone. I don't know what that is. Cody's going to be a politician. It was all foreshadowing. We also had from Daryl Canty. It was a very tone-deaf promo.
I agree with that one. I agree with all of them. I think he's obviously foreshadowing a political career. That's what you said. And I also think it was pretty tone-deaf because I don't think it speaks to where the country is right now.
Yeah, and Lady Wiz, it was an odd promo for sure. So thank you all for the comments there about AEW Dynamite. We have a couple news items here that we're going to dive into. If you're an audio form, we'll dive into Joe Dombrowski. And if you're watching us in video, we'll wrap up the show here with the mailbag in just a second. But Showbuzz Daily reporting Tuesday's live edition of NXT on USA did 697,000 viewers on USA. This week's NXT viewership down 8.4% from last week's show, which drew 761,000 viewers. This was the worst audience for NXT since the move to Tuesday nights. The key 18 to 49 demo rating was down 5.6% from last week's 0.17. The key demo rating was the lowest for NXT since March 24th. That includes 2 episodes that were head-to-head with Dynamite. They ranked number 25 on the cable top 150. They ranked number 64 in overall viewership, down from last week's number 60. This week's NXT viewership, however, was up 15.4% from where they were in 2020, with the key demo being up 13.3% from last year in 2020. So up from where they were a year ago. But, man, I don't know how you can't classify that as anything but disappointing that they're back to where they were head-to-head with Dynamite and even a little below, man. That's wild.
The part that's disappointing to me about this isn't, I don't, even when they were head-to-head, I did not really try to compare the two. I always watched both. I watched one in tape delay, obviously. But what disappoints me about this is I think that WWE, if it tried hard enough, could start to elevate the viewership of this by talking about the history that some of their current stars had in NXT. If you promote NXT as something that's really viable to help develop these stars that come over to Raw or SmackDown, so you present it as a third brand that is sort of on par, the way they would talk about people who are a SmackDown champion or whatever. I think that one of the things that could hurt their viewership in terms of bringing over those, like the Raw audience specifically, is how poorly a lot of really fantastic NXT talent fare once they go to Raw. I mean, you think about people like Ricochet, there's only a handful of people who've been really treated quite well once they got to Raw. Others maybe come in, make a splash, and then the next thing you know, they're doing horrendously.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I've seen people talk about that on social media where it's like the luster of NXT used to be that this is where you saw talent, they built them up to a fever pitch, there was some kind of big moment or match that afterwards they were going to leave, and then they were onto the roster, and you went back to finding the next big thing. Now with talent, staying with NXT for such a long period of time, you're trying to create new scenarios. I think Hit Row Records was a great addition to the product. I like the Cameron Grimes stuff, but it does seem like they're lacking for whatever that big program is at the moment. They had a couple going into Mania, and now I don't really know exactly which direction they're going at the moment.
I wish that they would begin to include NXT in some of the crossover stuff a little bit more. We did see some of that, for example, with the women's tag team titles coming over, but wouldn't it be really nice if NXT had the opportunity to be part of the draft where people could, where Raw could be like, we are so obsessed with this NXT star that we're willing to give you 2 Raw stars. And, I guess maybe it would be perceived as a come down for some of those talents that get sent to NXT. But if you're only going to be there like maybe 8 months or something like that to really build up some people before you jump back over to maybe SmackDown and give them a refresher and a restart, that would be really helpful, I think.
All right. And lastly, here before we get to Joe for you in audio form and the mailbag for everybody watching right now live. Tonight, Vice TV presents their latest Dark Side of the Ring. The trailer dropped yesterday for the Nick Gage episode that is coming out tonight. It features Gage talking about when he was at his lowest, how he decided to rob a bank, how he did rob a bank. And then I guess he went to Brett Lauderdale's house, the GCW owner, which I did not know that that's where he went after he robbed the bank, was to go see Brett.
It seems like a great place.
It seems like a good place to go. Go drop a bunch of stolen bills on my boss's desk.
Let me just drag somebody into this massive crime that I just committed.
I was thinking the same thing, dude. I would have been so pissed. I'd have been like, dude, what? Get out of my house, man.
You robbed a bank? I'm calling the police in like 30 seconds. I have to clear my name. Get out.
Yeah. We'll find out. Maybe that's what Brett did. I don't really know
right.
But I just wanted to bring this up. I'm very excited about this show tonight. I guess I could talk more about it tomorrow after I've actually watched it. But I wanted to make sure to bring it up because you're in the GCW family. Like, what's your excitement level for tonight's Nick Gage episode, Paul?
I love the fact that something like GCW, which is really game changing because they bring people from all over the indie circuits together and allow us to work together. Great. My upstairs neighbor just flushed the toilet. Sorry, y'all. But, I think that this is one of the first times that I can remember where they're really veering outside of that really mainstream type of wrestling name. I'm sure that there were others that, if I really, really thought back, but most
Hernandez, I don't think people really knew who Gino was, that story, but you're right. Yeah. There have not been a lot of low key deep cut stories like Gage. Yeah.
Yeah. But even Gino Hernandez, for that one was very specific to a time frame, right? At the time frame that they were focused on, Gino Hernandez was huge, and world-class championship wrestling was also huge. It was riding on that wave of the Von Erichs and the success. And as somebody who experienced all of that stuff firsthand live as a viewer, as a young fan, that was huge. It definitely deserved that kind of coverage. But Nick Gage is somebody who is still on the circuit, still making a name for himself, has a tremendous reputation out on the indies. And I think that it's one of the scenarios where it's going to do really well for somebody who is still a viable talent. I hope that they don't cut some of the corners that I felt that they did in the Brian Pillman story, though.
All right, well, that'll bring us to the end of the show, everybody. Well, I shouldn't say the end of the show. It brings us to the mailbag. Thank you so much to Joe Dombrowski for that great interview. Again, you're watching us live in video. You can go check that out on the YouTube channel right now. Learn all about the Brian Pillman Memorial Show 20th Anniversary Anthology. It's in conjunction with the Pillman Estate. A lot of great content over there. Go support Joe and the Pillmans. But that'll take us to the mailbag at Wink Daily, WINC Daily. That is the Twitter account to follow. We have surpassed 1,000 followers. Oh my goodness, we are on our way to 2,000 followers now over at the account. If you want to know what the daily poll is, you want to find out about guests, new episodes, all those great things, that's the account to follow. Today's poll question: what was match of the night on AEW Dynamite? Was it Miro Darby, SCU Young Bucks, Moxley Nagata, or Pac Orange Cassidy? With over 250 votes here, 39% Miro Darby, 30.1 SCU Young Bucks, 26% Moxley Nagata, and only 4.9% Pac Orange Cassidy, although that was mired with some circumstances. But look, 3 matches here, separated by only 13%, Paul. I mean, it seems like people got their money's worth last night on the show.
Aside from all of the minuscule things that we've discussed that I didn't particularly like or other people may have questioned, AEW Dynamite traditionally is you get your money's worth for tuning in. I mean, it's free, so you can tune in and definitely get your money's worth, but it's great viewing. It's a couple hours of fantastic pro wrestling. We get to see some of the stars that we have grown to love over the years and some that we're growing to love even now. And I always enjoy the show.
Yeah. We'll read a couple of feedback here. And by the way, you voted for SCU Bucks, right? That was
I did.
Yeah. I voted for SCU Bucks too, just because I thought Miro Darby was what I wanted. I thought that was a really good match. I thought it was a big title change, but just like you, man, the emotional stakes were
much higher.
And now that you point out how I could have gotten another minute of that moment breathing instead of that backstage attack, which totally could have been saved for next week.
Or it could have totally been saved until shortly after. You know what I mean? Why not have SCU go into the back and have Kingston and Moxley greet them and then be so pissed about what happened that is the catalyst, for what happens after.
Buscat, they voted SCU Bucks. And then we had also from at Huge Tiny Mistake, the atmosphere for Moxley Nagata was so cool, and I enjoyed it more than Darby versus Miro due to my enjoyment of New Japan, but the latter definitely was more important now for AEW. The reception for Nagata bodes well for New Japan, AEW working together, though. And I agree with that. And
wholeheartedly.
The thing about like AEW, Paul, like versus NXT, is like AEW feels like a big deal, right? Like every match has got some kind of thing or whatever going on into it. NXT is a very good product, but it's starting to feel more and more WWE clean lines. It doesn't have that kind of frenetic, anything can happen type feel that I think AEW's got going on at the moment.
I definitely would agree with that. The idea that we legitimately do not know week to week what new random person AEW is going to allow through their forbidden door, right? Like, you know, we've got people coming in from NWA, we've got people coming in from Impact, we've got people coming in from New Japan. There is a strong possibility, and of course they also showcase great wrestlers frequently from the indie scene. So there is that idea that you sort of have to tune in to see what could happen versus NXT, which I think is, in terms of cleanliness of product, I think it is superior to AEW. But at the same time, you know, there's not as much to keep pulling you in from outside. If you're not invested already, there's not a lot that's going to direct your eyes to it.
All right. And last two here, Raj Mooker, they liked the Cody Rhodes promo, and then Nerf Herder said definitely Darby and Miro. So anyway, thank you guys so much for voting in the poll. That's going to bring us to the end of the show today. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to be joined by Christy Olson for the first time in Technicolor here.
So excited.
Tomorrow on the site, over on the YouTube channel, and on the podcast, we're going to drop Scott Fishman's conversation, former WWE superstar Katarina Waters, who was
I love her. I love her. I've developed a friendship with her and gotten to work with her in the past, and she's so phenomenal.
Yeah, she's great. So Katarina and Scott will be here tomorrow. Obviously, if you like the Wrestling Inc. Daily, support WrestlingInc.com. We're on all your favorite social media platforms, and of course on YouTube. You can find us Monday through Friday, noon Eastern, with the Daily, and then at nights after shows and pay-per-views, we go live with the Wrestling Inc. podcast. You can subscribe to both of those over on your preferred podcast platform. That's the Daily and the Wrestling Inc. podcast. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Great debut. Very happy to have you as part of the team here and the family over at the Wrestling Inc. Daily. And thank you to everybody who jumped into the comments section and left, you know, if you want to, on your way out, leave a thumbs up or a heart or more comments, whatever, to show your support. Paul, what do you want to plug, promote, put over to wrap up the show today?
I think the only thing I really have to plug is I'm really working hard to build a Twitch following. I love the idea of being more interactive with my audiences. So head over to twitch.tv/Pollo Del Mar. Follow me on Twitter. That way we can interact. And I'm just really stoked to be part of the Wrestling Inc. family and here on Wrestling Inc. Daily with you every single Thursday, noon Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah, and I am Nick_Houseman over on Twitter. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you tomorrow to close out the week. And remember, if you winked, you didn't miss it.